BBC News at midday. Labour has backtracked on a pledge to spend £28 billion a year on green industry projects if it wins the next election. The Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, told Today on Radio 4 that instead her party would try to reach this figure by the second half of the next Parliament. The Conservatives said the opposition's main economic policy was in tatters, but Ms Reeves said the Tories had crashed the economy and rejected the suggestion that if Labour came to power, it may begin by investing nothing in the scheme.
We are more ambitious than that. We haven't had the final set of numbers from the government, so we're not going to give our final set. No plan can be built that's not on a rock of economic and fiscal responsibility, because if you try to do things that then crash markets, you end up in the position that the Conservatives ended.
Ukraine's President Zelensky has warned that hundreds of thousands of people have limited access to drinking water because of the burst dam in the southern province of Kherson. A Ukrainian official said at least 5 people had been killed and 13 people were missing, but many messages have been posted on social media by families saying they need urgent help. Russia denies being behind the breach, which happened in the area it controls. But Norwegian experts say there was an explosion at this location, which coincided with the time of the collapse. Ukraine also says it has intelligence that Moscow was to blame, as our correspondent in Kiev, Paul Adams, explains.
Ukrainian intelligence has released a transcript and a recording of a phone conversation which they say, and we have not been able to verify this, is a conversation between 2 Russian soldiers discussing Russia's responsibility for blowing up the dam. Now, as I say, we can't confirm that, but the Ukrainians have argued since last April that the dam had been mined by Russian forces.
The TASS news agency in Moscow says that Russia's chief of the general staff, Valery Gerasimov, has invited his Chinese counterpart to visit. He is also reported as saying that the 2 countries will expand their military cooperation. Donald Trump says he's been formally charged over his handling of classified documents after he left the White House in 2021. This is the first federal indictment of a former U.S. president and comes at a time when Mr. Trump is the front-runner to be the Republican candidate in next year's election. He's also being investigated for alleged election interference, his role in the January 6th riots, and falsifying business records. But our North America editor, Sarah Smith, says the cases against him won't go to court quickly.
Probably be a year or so before that would happen, which tips you into a presidential year, of course. It's difficult to see how a judge would allow a case to go on if you've got a presidential nominee who might be kept from the campaign trail because he's in court. This is unprecedented and messy.
The police watchdog is investigating the death of a 15-year-old boy who collided with an ambulance on an e-bike in Salford in Greater Manchester. Police say that traffic officers had been following the teenager until bollards blocked their vehicle's path. He's been named locally as Saul Cookson. Our reporter, Rowan Bridge, is at the scene.
Tribute's been left to him, and one of them is a photograph of Saul. There are also candles and cards, flowers, balloons, and then a large white banner with Saul's name written all over it, and messages like "Rest in peace, brother," and "Forever 15," a reference to how young the boy was who died yesterday. The circumstances of exactly what happened is still really coming out.
The environmental campaigner Greta Thunberg, who began weekly school strikes in protest at the lack of action on climate change, says she's held her final walkout because she's graduating today. The 20-year-old strikes in Sweden became a global movement with millions taking part in schools around the world. Greta Thunberg says she'll continue to protest on Fridays. BBC News.